The Zodiac Killer terrified Northern California, but he didn't just kill people. He wrote letters, he sent them to newspapers, he demanded they be published. He craved the attention, he needed the ink. His crimes were horrific, but they were almost secondary. The real performance was on the printed page. He was creating his story, and he wanted everyone to read it. This obsession with the press, with bylines and front pages, has led to a persistent question. A question that gets under your skin. Could the Zodiac Killer have been a newspaper columnist? Could he have been one of them? To understand this, you have to understand the media landscape of the late 1960s. There was no internet, no 24-hour cable news. The daily newspaper was king. The San Francisco Chronicle, the San Francisco Examiner, the Vallejo Times-Herald. These papers were the heart of the community's conversation. They set the tone. They decided what was important, and the Zodiac knew it. His first confirmed letters arrived in August 1969. They were sent to 3 different papers. They contained details only the killer could know. And they included parts of a cipher. His demand was simple. Print this on your front page, or I will kill again. He wasn't just confessing. He was dictating terms. He was acting like an editor, not just a source. He understood leverage. He knew that the threat of more violence, combined with the tantalizing puzzle of a cipher, was a story no paper could refuse. And he was right. They printed it. From that moment on, the Zodiac had a platform. He had a direct line to the public, and the newspapers were his unwilling partners. He played them like a fiddle. He knew their deadlines, he knew their rivalries. He would send letters to different papers, creating competition. He would praise one reporter and mock another. He seemed to understand the internal dynamics of a newsroom. He knew how to craft a message that would grab a headline. This is the Zodiac speaking. What a chilling, perfect opening. It was a brand. He was creating his own legend, one letter at a time. This inside knowledge, this masterful manipulation of the press, is the first major clue. It's what makes the journalist theory so compelling. A random factory worker or a disgruntled cab driver might be angry. They might want revenge, but would they understand the nuances of media manipulation so well? Would they know that sending a piece of a victim's bloody shirt was the ultimate proof, the kind of grisly detail a paper couldn't ignore? Maybe. But a newspaperman would know for sure. He would live and breathe that world. He would know exactly what buttons to push. And then there was Paul Avery. Paul Avery was a star crime reporter for the San Francisco Chronicle. He was the real deal. He was a hard-drinking, chain-smoking, flamboyant character. He wore stylish clothes. He had sources everywhere. He was known for his tenacity and his ability to get the story no one else could. When that case broke, it was Avery's story. He owned it. He wrote the big front-page articles. He was the public face of the Chronicle's investigation. For over a year, Avery reported on the Zodiac's crimes and letters. He analyzed the ciphers. He spoke with detectives. He was, in a way, in a dialogue with the killer. The Zodiac would write, and Avery would report. It was a strange, macabre dance. The killer set the stage, and the reporter described the scene. Then, on October 27th, 1970, the dance changed. The Zodiac made it personal. A Halloween card arrived at the San Francisco Chronicle. It was addressed directly to Paul Avery, not to the editor, not to the paper in general. To Paul Avery, a deliberate, mocking misspelling. On the front of the card was a skeleton. Inside, a message. From your secret pal, and a threat. Peekaboo, you're doomed. The card was pasted together with letters cut from magazines, like a classic ransom note. It also contained the chilling suggestion that the Zodiac's bombs were not for killing people, but for blowing up school buses. The threat was clear. Zodiac was no longer just a source for Avery's stories. He was now the subject of Avery's own story. Avery had become a character in the Zodiac's twisted narrative. This was a turning point. It electrified the Chronicle newsroom. The story was no longer out there in the dark streets of Vallejo or Napa. It was inside their building. It was breathing down the neck of one of their own. Avery, to his credit, didn't back down. He started carrying a .38 caliber revolver. He wrote an article about the threat, printing the card for all to see. He was defiant. But the threat had changed him. It had changed the case, and it planted the seed of a dark thought. Why Avery? Why single out one reporter? The simplest answer is that Zodiac was an avid reader. And he read Avery's coverage. Maybe he felt Avery was getting too close, or maybe he just resented Avery's fame. Avery was getting bylines for the Zodiac's work. Perhaps the killer felt it was time to share the spotlight, or to remind the reporter who was really in charge. This is the most likely scenario. Zodiac, the ultimate narcissist, couldn't stand someone else getting credit for his story. But there are other, more disturbing possibilities that stem from the journalist theory. If the Zodiac was a newspaperman, then his targeting of Paul Avery takes on a whole new meaning. He wasn't just targeting a reporter, he was targeting a colleague, a rival. Think about the world of a 1960s newsroom. It was a competitive, pressure-filled environment, full of big egos, ambition, and professional jealousy. Reporters competed for scoops, for bylines, for the front page. A crime reporter who wasn't on the Zodiac story would have been watching Paul Avery with a mix of awe and envy. For Avery had the story of a lifetime. He was a local celebrity. What if the Zodiac was another journalist, sitting in another newsroom or even in the same one? Watching Avery get all the glory, a frustrated, overlooked writer, someone who felt they were smarter, more talented, but stuck writing obituaries or covering city hall meetings. This person would have a deep, burning resentment. They would see Avery as a symbol of their own failure. In this scenario, the murders are almost a means to an end. The end is the letter. The writing. The real crime is a form of literary criticism. The killer is saying, you think you can write? I can write. I can create a story so powerful it will bring this entire city to its knees. And you, Paul Avery, you're just my stenographer. The Halloween card then becomes a piece of professional rivalry, a twisted office prank taken to a murderous extreme. The misspelling of Averly is a little dig, an insult. Peek-a-boo, you are doomed, is not just a threat of violence. It's a threat to Avery's career, to his identity. It's the Zodiac saying, I own this story now, you are irrelevant. This theory explains so much. It explains the killer's understanding of news cycle. It explains his flair for the dramatic, his use of catchy phrases. It explains his need for public acknowledgement. For a writer, there is nothing worse than being ignored. The Zodiac made sure he was never ignored. The language of the letters themselves is a key point of debate. They are filled with grammatical errors and misspellings. I like killing people because it is so much fun. This is the Zodiac speaking. The spelling is often atrocious. Christmas is spelled Christmas. Citizens is spelled citizens. Many people see this as proof that the killer was uneducated, a simple man. But a journalist, a professional writer, would be the perfect person to fake a lack of education. It's a classic misdirection. A writer knows rules of grammar so well that they know exactly how to break them to create a persona. They could be consciously crafting the voice of a madman, a clumsy, unhinged brute. It's a mask. Underneath the sloppy spelling could be a sharp literary mind. A mind that enjoyed the irony of fooling a bunch of well-educated editors and detectives. There are also moments of strange, almost poetic, language in the letters. He refers to his victims as his slaves in the afterlife, or paradise, as he misspelled it. He created his own mythology. He designed his own symbol, the crosshairs. He gave himself a name worthy of a comic book villain. This isn't the work of a simple thug. This is the work of someone with a powerful, if twisted, imagination. Someone who understands storytelling. The theory also casts a new light on some of the Zodiac's specific actions. He sent a letter with a piece of a victim's bloody shirt to the Chronicle. This is a classic journalistic move providing irrefutable proof. It's the ultimate show don't tell. He was authenticating his story just like a reporter would authenticate a source. He also seemed to have an unusual interest in police procedure. He would mock the police in his letters, claiming they were incompetent. The blue meanies. He seemed to know which details they had released to the public and which they had kept secret. A crime reporter would have this kind of knowledge. They have sources in the police department. They attend press conferences, they know the cops on the beat. A journalist would be in a perfect position to taunt the police with inside information, or at least the appearance of it. This brings us to a very uncomfortable question. Could Paul Avery himself have been the Zodiac? It's a theory that has been whispered for decades. It's mostly confined to the fringes of Zodiac research, but it refuses to die. The logic is dark and circular. Who had the most to gain from the Zodiac story? Well, Paul Avery. His career was built on it. Who had the best access to the information? Paul Avery. Who did the Zodiac single out? Paul Avery. The idea is that Avery was creating the story he was reporting. A monstrous, unethical act of careerism. The Halloween card, in this theory, is the ultimate act of misdirection. Avery sends a threat to himself to remove any suspicion. He makes himself a victim. It's a brilliant, narcissistic move. But it's almost certainly not true. The evidence against Avery being the Zodiac is overwhelming. The police, of course, considered him. They had to. But he had alibis for the times of the murders. His handwriting didn't match the Zodiac's, his fingerprints didn't match. Nothing concrete ever linked him to the crimes. His colleagues at the Chronicle scoffed at the idea. They knew him as a dedicated, if eccentric, reporter. Not a killer. Paul Avery was haunted by the Zodiac case for the rest of his life. He left the Chronicle and his life took a downward spiral of addiction and health problems. This doesn't seem like the behavior of a master criminal who got away with it all. It seems like the behavior of a man who got too close to the abyss and never fully recovered. The story consumed him. It broke him. He was a victim of the Zodiac, just in a different way. So, if Avery wasn't the Zodiac, the question remains who was. If we stick with the journalist theory, we have to look beyond Paul Avery. There have been other suspects with ties to the newspaper world. The most prominent is Richard Gaikowski. Gaikowski worked as a copy editor for The Good Times, an underground newspaper in San Francisco during the Zodiac period. He fit the timeline. He had a history of mental health issues. A friend claimed he had confessed to being the Zodiac. His handwriting had some similarities to the killers. He was a writer and an editor. He lived and worked in the world of print. He is, for many, a very compelling suspect. But like all Zodiac suspects, the evidence is circumstantial. There is no smoking gun. But the theory is bigger than any single suspect. It's about a type of person. It's a profile. The Zodiac wasn't just killing, he was publishing, he was crafting a public persona. He was obsessed with his own myth. And where do you find people obsessed with public narratives, with bylines, with making a name for themselves? You find him in newsrooms. Imagine a man in the late 1960s. He's smart, but he feels unrecognized. He works at a newspaper, but he's not a star like Paul Avery. Maybe he's a copy editor, cleaning up other people's words. Maybe he's a typesetter, arranging the letters on the page. Maybe he's a low-level reporter at a smaller, rival paper, dreaming of the big time. He sees the power of the front page every day. He sees how a story can shape public opinion, create fear, make a name. He is surrounded by the machinery of fame, but he is just a cog. He feels invisible. So he decides to create a story that no one can ignore. A story so big it will dwarf everything else. He will become the author of the city's fear. He commits his first murders. They are brutal but efficient. The real work begins when he gets home. He sits down at his typewriter. He carefully crafts his letter. He chooses his words. He decides which details to include, which to withhold. He creates a cipher, a puzzle to engage the intellectuals he despises. He addresses the envelope to the editor, a person he might know professionally. He drops it in the mail, then he goes to work the next day, and he watches. He watches the letter arrive. He sees the panic and excitement it creates. He watches the editors scramble. He sees them decide to put his words, his creation, on the front page. He sees his symbol, his name, in big, bold type. For the first time, he feels seen. He feels powerful. He walks over to the printing press and watches the papers roll off, still smelling of fresh ink, or his ink, his story. He reads Paul Avery's article about his crime. He feels a thrill of connection, of rivalry. He thinks, "You're good, Avery, but I'm better. You're just telling the story. I'm creating it." This narrative is compelling because it makes psychological sense. It explains the why behind the Zodiac's actions better than many other theories. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about a specific grudge against the victims. It was about fame, a dark, twisted, murderous kind of fame. The Zodiac wanted credit for his work. It's the same impulse that drives a writer to put their name on a book or a reporter to fight for a byline. The impulse to say, "I did this. This is mine." Of course, there are problems. The misspellings could be genuine. The killer could have just been a smart, manipulative person from any walk of life who understood the power of the media. A soldier, a police officer, a teacher. The profile is not exclusive to journalists. And the biggest problem is the lack of proof. It remains a theory, a good one, a plausible one, but a theory nonetheless. No journalist was ever charged. No evidence has ever definitively linked a member of the Bay Area press to the Zodiac crimes. The connection to Paul Avery is the heart of it all. He was the anchor. The Zodiac's focus on him feels like a professional courtesy, a tip of the hat from one storyteller to another, or maybe a bitter complaint from a failed writer to a successful one. You get the front page for writing about crime, the Zodiac seems to be saying. I get the front page for committing it. The Zodiac case is a story about many things. It's about murder, fear, and the failure of law enforcement. But at its core, it's a story about a voice. A taunting, arrogant voice that came out of the darkness and demanded to be heard. He chose the newspapers as his stage. He used their ink, their paper, their distribution networks to spread his message of terror. He understood them. He knew their language. He knew their power. It's hard to shake the feeling that he knew these things because he was one of them. Hiding in plain sight. Reading the paper every morning to see his own words, his own legend, grow. The man who wrote the headlines in more ways than one. The story of the Zodiac and Paul Avery is a chilling reminder that sometimes the person covering the story, or someone very much like him, might be the most important character of all. The mystery endures not just because we don't know who the Zodiac was, but because his actions suggest a familiarity, a closeness that is deeply unsettling. He wasn't just an outsider terrorizing the city. He may have been on the inside all along, watching, waiting, and writing.